Hello there, welcome to the Soil and Roots podcast, digging beneath the surface to uncover the hidden ideas that form us, the church, and the culture. I'm Brian Fisher, and this is episode 126, Do-It-Yourself Log Removal. Well, it's a good day here at Fish Tank Studios. As I record this, I can smell peanut butter cookies and maybe chocolate chip cookies being baked downstairs, and the smell is wafting up into the studio, so that makes it a pretty good time. I might get a bit distracted. Unfortunately, I can no longer eat those types of cookies, but somebody this week here at the house will be enjoying them. We have some company coming over a little bit later, and they are going to be treated, and I will live vicariously through them. Anyhow, Soil and Roots, this podcast that chances are you've been listening to or watching for a long time, exists to encourage us to come together to help solve a major challenge. It's what theologian Dallas Willard called the Great Omission. Though we talk about making disciples a lot in Western Christianity, we actually struggle to do so. If you don't think the Great Omission is a problem, consider the number of denominations and sects and schisms and scandals, misbehaviors, fears, anxieties, divorces, porn addictions, and the nonsense that all too frequently characterizes modern Christianity. The first 5 seasons, we explored the Great Omission in great detail, including 3 other problems that drive this lack of genuine discipleship in the modern age. One of the primary drivers of the Great Omission is the shocking lack of emphasis on the fact that the discipleship journey is one of becoming formed more like Jesus from the inside out. We can sit in church for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but if we aren't becoming more loving, aren't relating more like him, there doesn't seem to be much going on in our hearts. So things like church attendance and doctrine, services, evangelism, they're all good things. But ideally, they flow out of a heart that is intentionally growing to speak, act, relate, and love more like Jesus over time. That premise raises an interesting question. If the point of our spiritual journey is to become more like Jesus, what is Jesus really like? Do we have a clear picture of the person that we're supposed to emulate? So, here in season 6, and we're rounding the corner to the finish line, we're exploring some perhaps unexpected traits of Jesus. We've talked about his abiding relational security and his extraordinary intimate connection to the Father. We've discussed his tendency to be confusing, mysterious, even cryptic, and we've explored his relational discernment, his shrewdness. So today we're going to look at another characteristic of Jesus that doesn't always make it into our church halls, Jesus as judge. Now, the way we normally understand being judgmental, it's not exactly a trait that will win us many popularity contests. Maybe somebody has told you that they just love it when you judge them, or maybe you've heard that Christians in general really ought to be more judgy, but probably not. So let's dive into this sometimes confusing trait of Jesus. If you'd like a frank assessment of your talent, one option is to go on a television show that Simon Cowell judges. On American Idol or The X Factor or Britain's Got Talent, Simon made a name for himself by the brutal and often witty ways that he told contestants precisely what he thought about their talents. He told one singer, "If you had lived 2,000 years ago and sung like that, I think they may have stoned you." To another, he said it was a bit like ordering a hamburger and only getting the bun. He advised one contestant, "Do you have a singing teacher? Get a lawyer and sue her." And he told a lifeguard who came to audition as a singer, if your lifeguarding duties were as good as your singing, a lot of people would be drowning. Ouch. Or perhaps you're a budding chef looking for honest feedback. Just participate in a show like Hell's Kitchen or Master Chef, and Gordon Ramsay won't hesitate to share his thoughts. He told one aspiring chef, "This fish is so raw, he's still finding Nemo." To another, he said, "There's enough garlic in here to kill every vampire in Europe." And he told one other chef, "I wouldn't trust you running a bath, let alone a restaurant." And to yet another, he said, "This lamb is so undercooked, it's still following Mary to school." Simon Cowell and Gordon Ramsay certainly have some strong opinions. Somewhat ironically, our culture strongly dislikes it when someone judges us, but the ratings of these types of shows suggest that we love it when other people are being judged. Celebrity chefs and music critics aren't the only ones sitting in the metaphorical judgment seat. We all constantly judge aspects of our culture. It's impossible not to. We have to make everyday judgments just to survive. According to the dictionary, to judge means to form a conclusion about something through careful weighing of evidence, to form an estimate or an evaluation, or to hold an opinion, especially a negative opinion. We have evaluations and opinions on many, many things. We judge soda flavors. We judge the service we get at restaurants or the time it takes at a drive-thru. We judge the decisions and actions of our neighbors, our coworkers, our family members, and our friends. In athletics, academics, entertainment, judges evaluate every competition, from spelling bees to the Academy Awards to the Olympics. We have teachers and professors judging schoolwork assignments and committees judging the Nobel Prize. Agents and publishers judge book submissions, drill sergeants judge soldiers at boot camp, and higher officials judge military plans. And of course, we have a court system with different levels of judiciary, from lower courts to high courts to judges at the Supreme Courts. Studies show that people form judgments about another person's trustworthiness, their attractiveness, their likability, competence, and aggressiveness within a tenth of a second of meeting them. A study published in Social, Psychological, and Personality Science found that the glance at a person's face for as little as 1/30th of a second was sufficient to form a first impression. We often, literally and figuratively, judge a book by its cover. From Judge Judy to Judge Dredd, judgment pervades all parts of our society. It's how we rank and categorize and approve. It's also how we aim to administer fairness and justice, at least in theory. We critique and evaluate. We decide on good, better, best. We determine right and wrong. So if judgment is such a pervasive part of our world, how are we as Christians meant to approach it? If we're trying to be like Jesus, are we supposed to judge, not to judge? And why is this so often unclear? And why does judging sometimes get us in so much trouble? Well, maybe judging the new frosty flavor at Wendy's isn't what people have in mind when they accuse someone of being judgmental. We all judge, but there's a particular kind of judging that really tends to rock the boat. Judging other people's character, or their identity, or their choices. In Western culture, some people believe that there is no single absolute truth or universal standard of right and wrong, therefore no one should be judging. This is what's known as an idea of moral relativism. While it's very popular today, it's also nonsensical. From this perspective, it's a simple step to say that nobody has a right to judge. They might even use a Bible verse to back it up. Matthew 7:1, do not judge so that you won't be judged. But here's the thing, judgment is inescapable. We all judge. In fact, if you claim that judging another is wrong, you've just passed judgment on another. Even moral relativists have to have some sort of moral center. If you steal their car, they're still going to think it's wrong. Nobody actually lives by moral relativism. It's impossible. Our approach to judging and our response to being judged both stem from our ideas and our desires, which sit in the bedrock of our hearts. These ideas typically go unexamined and unexplored. We've talked about these concepts called ideas now for 3 years here at Soil and Roots. When we judge others or we react to being judged, it often reveals signs about the ideas that our hearts are rooted in, whether we're aware of them or not. They might reveal an insecurity, a deep desire to be liked, even when it isn't healthy, the need to prove ourselves or to perform, or frankly, 1,000 other things. For example, if I receive an email from a supervisor who assesses my work performance and finds it wanting, and I have an emotional meltdown, something is probably going on beneath the surface. If I passed up a family reunion to complete my work, then maybe I feel unappreciated. Maybe I feel injustice at this judgment when I've been working my tail off for months to gain this supervisor's approval of my work. Going even deeper, it may reveal a deep-seated desire for validation. Maybe I was raised in a family where I learned to be performance driven, trying to please others. Perhaps my identity is intertwined with my work and receiving the stamp of approval. So this email, which judges my work, feels like it's actually judging me and my worth as a person. This is all hypothetical, but you get the idea. If we are hypersensitive to criticism, to being judged, it shows a wound and an insecurity in that area, which we can work to heal with the help of friends and, frankly, self-examination and the Lord's guidance. And if we are quick to judge others in a certain way, it can indicate a similar struggle, shortcoming, or even a weakness or a prejudice in our own hearts, and we can work through that with the same level of transparency and openness to change. Well, the goal here is for our hearts to be transformed to be like Jesus, and for our hidden ideas to be formed into His. This means that we can and should learn to judge like He does. Well, the most quoted Bible verse related to judgment is the one I already referenced, Matthew 7:1. Do not judge so that you won't be judged. But if you just read on another sentence, Jesus says, for you will be judged by the same standard with which you judge others, and you will be measured by the same measures you use. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye but don't notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and look, there's a log in your own eye? Hypocrite, first take the log out of your eye, and then you will be able to see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. So first, Jesus begins with a seemingly blanket statement, do not judge. However, he then proceeds with instructions on specifically how to judge. Paul Copan, in an article for the Apologetics Study Bible, writes this: how do we resolve this apparent tension? By taking note of the spirit in which we make judgments. Do we think we're superior, which is the attitude Jesus condemned, or are we assessing actions and attitudes with a spirit of humility and concern, recognizing our own weaknesses? In Matthew 7:5, Jesus told us first to examine ourselves, then we can help our brother or sister. So there is a problem to be dealt with, but only after self-examination. We don't always link judgment with self-examination, but there is a clear progression here. We are to help our brother remove the splinter in his eye, but only after we remove the log in our own. The Bible doesn't say to leave both pieces of wood where they are. The goal is not for each of us to insist that we are right, to agree to disagree, and to part ways with nothing fundamentally changed. The goal is for both obstructions to be removed so that we can both see each other and God clearly. Here again, we find the idea of being authentic with ourselves and with others, something that many struggle with because we would rather present our false selves, our shadow selves. Now, imagine you go to an optometrist to have your eyes examined, but the eye doctor comes out with a blindfold on. You'd be a little bit skeptical about her ability to evaluate your eyes. An eye doctor needs to see clearly so that you can see clearly. We've been talking a lot about discernment lately, as with Jesus' remarkable relational discernment. Discernment requires clear sight. It involves incredible perception, an ability to see beyond the surface, and that starts with seeing beyond the surface of ourselves. Season 2 covered this in detail. It's the concept of Heartview. As a very quick recap, Heartview is the practice of paying attention to the signals that our heart gives through what we call the 8 indicators. These 8 indicators are our thought patterns, our emotions, our health, our actions, our relationships, and how we use and steward time and money. Each of these indicators reveals what's actually going on in our hearts beneath the surface, provided we accept Jesus' invitation to explore our true ideas and our true desires and our stories, usually with trusted friends. We sometimes call this mining for our own desires and ideas in the sense of digging deep until the truth, the kind of treasure, is found, possibly far below the surface of our normal day-to-day activities and thoughts. My experience, many people don't know their hearts very well, and we don't receive a lot of encouragement to dig into those depths. Again, usually the practice of Heartview is frowned upon and considered a waste of time, if not selfish. Modern Christianity might give us phrases, pithy phrases, such as just give it to God or nail it to the cross, but less likely to give us permission or guidance for the long, sometimes messy, complicated work of digging into our stories, into our wounds, into our hearts, to bring to light the ideas that are actually at work there. But only when we do this can we discover what we truly believe about ourselves, what we truly believe about God, or whether our ideas actually align with God's ideas. Paul Copan goes on to say this: the wrong kind of judgment is condemning. The right kind of judging is properly evaluating moral or doctrinal matters with a humble, helpful attitude. We should treat others the way that we would want to be treated, thinking, there, but for the grace of God, go I. Humility sort of comes naturally when we take the time to truly explore our own hearts. We're going to find light and dark ideas. We're going to find good and bad desires. None of us are going to find perfection here. We all carry wounds and hurts and sorrows from our stories. But when we look honestly at those true ideas and desires, we realize just how much we do depend on the grace of God and how we are beautifully and intimately and intricately woven together. When Heartview is an ongoing practice and habit, a regular part of our lives and our apprenticeship with Jesus, we will develop a spirit of humility and compassion for others. Then we will see a brother or sister in need of help or correction. We are more likely to act as Jesus would, trusting the Holy Spirit for guidance and following Jesus' example. The folks over at the Bible Project have some great resources on this topic of judging in their podcast episode from July 29th, 2024, entitled, Is There Ever a Time to Judge Others? John Collins and Tim Mackey note that Jesus begins with the command not to judge, but then turns around and says how we should judge, but only in certain ways and circumstances. There, as often is with Jesus, nuance and complexity that we really need to pay attention to. John and Tim note we may well get it wrong if we try to determine someone else's motives when we likely struggle to even determine our own. We think we're evaluating other people's behavior in a fair, equitable, unbiased way, but what if we turned it around and used the same measure on our own behavior? Are we treating others with the kindness and generosity that we use to evaluate ourselves? They point out this, quote, Jesus cares very much about right relationships. He also is very tolerant of ambiguity and of the mixed nature of the human heart and therefore the mixed nature of the community of his disciples. He was kind to Judas until the very end. He never treated him unkindly, even when he knew. Dallas Willard's The Divine Conspiracy is also helpful here. Willard writes, quote, it would really help those close to us and dear if we would learn to live together with our family and neighbors in the power of the kingdom. We must abandon the deeply rooted human practice of condemning and blaming, end quote. Willard observes that people do sometimes need correction, but that we can evaluate an act without condemnation or the contempt and anger that so often accompany it, which brings feelings of rejection and shame and often retaliation. As I noted at the start, judgment is all around us and a necessary part of life. You can't function in a society without it. We must all judge the words and actions of the people around us, not just our neighbors and coworkers, but also our family members, our friends, leaders in government, and elsewhere. We have to make decisions for the good of ourselves and those we care for and for the kingdom itself. We are obligated to judge and act accordingly. How attuned are we to God and to ourselves and to the hearts of others, though, as we judge? Jesus was constantly making judgments according to the heart. He was perfectly attuned to his own heart, to the heart of his Father, and to the hearts of those around him. So to be like him, we put in the effort to mine our own ideas through Heartview and ensure they align with God's ideas. We learn to listen, truly listen, to what the hearts of others are revealing through their Heartview indicators. And we ask ourselves, are we truly putting others first, even as we judge them? Are we acting for their own good as we seek our own good? My friend Tim, or Doc as you know him, shares this, quote, one of the hardest parts of parenting a teenager has been helping him to judge right or wrong, safe or not safe, good or bad. Things seem black and white as a kid, but as you become an adult, the world is, in fact, all sorts of gray. When our oldest son knows other teens facing abuse or trauma or with allegations against them or issues with harmful substances, how to judge, how to best serve himself and them. Should he cut ties or be salt and light? Who should we believe? Which side to take? And my wife and I have to judge and take action as parents for our child's well-being and formation. We can't simply throw up our hands and tell him to do whatever he wants, and everyone else can too, because we're not going to judge. So we are trying to train our son to look below the surface and to be attuned to his own heart and the hearts of others. It requires patience, requires discernment, requires compassion to treat others as we would hope to be treated ourselves. In the real world, we can't escape judgment. We will all be judged, and we all judge others. As we judge others, we should guard against condemnation and contempt. This is judgment with an attitude of superiority and anger that leads to rejection and shame and retaliation from the person being judged. Judging can be very damaging and harmful. It can distance people from God rather than draw them nearer. It can drive a wedge. It can close doors. We examine our hearts and ensure we are judging with the right motives for their own good and for ours. The right kind of judging is actually a very loving thing to do. And so we practice heart listening. We consider our relationship with the other person and looking carefully at the context and the circumstances. We demonstrate relational discernment and compassion by putting ourselves in the other person's shoes and seeing the situation from their perspective. Logs can build homes to shelter us, fires to warm us, and bridges to connect us, but we have to take them out of our own eyes first. Thanks for being with me today. If you'd like to learn more about Soil and Roots and our ministry, you can do so by logging on to soilandroots.org. If you're on social media, you can check us out on Facebook and Instagram at Soil and Roots Podcast. That's Soil and Roots Podcast. If you're on YouTube or Substack, you can just check us out at Soil and Roots. Again, we've been doing extra writing over on Substack, so some of our long-form content is there, and you might find that helpful. If you'd like to financially support the work of Soil and Roots, you can give safely and securely at the website I just gave you. Today's episode was written by Dr. Tim Boswell, edited by moi, and produced by Zach Fisher. Zach also provides the music for our podcast, so if you like lo-fi, you can check out his channel on Spotify at FishU. Thanks again for being with me today, and we'll see you next time.